Okay, here we go. Recording is live. And I have many notes. Um, First off, hello everybody. If you don't know me, I'm Clixie. I run Legion of the Bloodworks. If you're from BDB, Pisces is also one of my officers, and that's kind of like how we have a lot of people from BDB in Legion. We are a trials training guild. We basically kind of break people into the in-game, try to train them up so that they can leave and do much sweatier things after us. We try to also offer some sweaty content too, so good times. Essentially what I am teaching here is everything healers need to know, from buffing, debuffing, cast per minute, just getting as much as you can out of your character as possible. It is one of, I guess, the more underrated roles in the game. DPS, you can very easily measure your success by doing numbers on a dummy, and that's not something that a whole lot of people, I guess, know how to track for a healer. So this is why I'm kind of putting this together, talking about your options, what kind of add-ons and what kind of in-game options you can use to make your experience better for yourself and for your group. I do strongly believe that this is a game and you should enjoy it. So if you're doing content that is frustrating you and you don't like it, or if you just don't like certain aspects of it, you don't have to do it. Obviously, we're going to go over, meta stuff so that you can improve, but never push yourself past, what you're enjoying. Okay. So we're going to start with some add-ons. I do have all of these listed already in my guide, but I'll kind of go over like what they're used for, why people have them as healers, etc. First off is action duration reminder. I downloaded that one to add a little counter on my in-game skills. So if you see my skills going off at the very bottom, they've got a little counter for how long they're going to last. There is an in-game option for this as well. If you go to settings, I think it's combat. Settings, combat, yeah, ability bar timers. That just gives you the timer for your skills. If you turn it on both so you can see your back bar timers as well. I just prefer the look of action duration reminder more. Generally, when I use action duration reminder, I do turn off pop-up alerts. If you download the add-on, it's going to keep them on by default, but it just puts a big pop-up in the middle of your screen every time your skills go out, and that just, I think, is a little bit distracting. So super important to have either timers or action duration reminder on. That way you know when your skills are running out. Okay, the next one that I use is combat metronome. So this one tracks the global cooldown. In this game, you kind of already know that when you cast a skill, you can't immediately cast it again after. It has to go through about a 1 second duration of casting, depending on the skill. So when I use combat metronome, it is to help me weave. We'll talk more about weaving in a bit, but weaving really keeps you on track with using your skills as soon as you can use them. That's going to raise just how many casts you have throughout the fight. So if you are casting on global cooldown, that means that you're getting as many casts out as possible, and that is the best for your group. The reason that I use combat metronome specifically is when I use the skill, you see this little bar come up just above my character's head. It has a little red line in the center there. That red line is where you would weave. So that's where you click. So if you see kind of the way that weaving works is you are canceling the animation of the light attack. So when you're light attacking, you have that full animation of your character lunging forwards and doing it. But you can interrupt that with a skill. So when you put that skill in, you can kind of see your character get interrupted from that animation. You're still having the light attack go off. So essentially you're getting a light attack and a skill for the price of a skill. But combat metronome is really helpful because it keeps you doing that on a specific schedule. Keeps you casting as fast as you can. Okay, another add-on, Raid Notifier. This is specifically for raids. It gives you calls, mechanic notifications, stuff like that. Same with codes, combat alerts, also a bunch of notifications. Codes also will go into dungeons as well, tell you when to dodge roll things. super helpful for tanks, but also DPS, because if an enemy is attacking you with a heavy attack, it will give you a little bar that fills up, and it has a line, and that tells you exactly where you do that dodge roll. Okay, Hodo reflexes is very important for healers specifically. I actually have mine set up in the top next to my group menu. So if you see the little 0.0 next to Warhorn, or next to the uh, Slayer bar there, or the Colossus, those are basically timers for when people use their ultimates. So if I go and I grab my ultimate with this ethereal well, okay, at the very top right next to my compass, you see a little number with the Warhorn symbol on it. That tells you how many people you're reaching with your ultimate. So right now, if I use my barrier, you're all gonna get it.
Not me, because I'm not in group.
Yeah.
Selfish.
Yep. So that helps. When you use your horn, it'll count down on the Major Slayer. This is to help track your group, so that nobody's horning at the same time. You guys are able to call, one person's horn, next person's horn. You see a little list of people's names here. So Takel, Lissa, Shred, Tano, and then me. Basically, that's the percentage of their ultimate. If one of you uses a horn, for example, it will start counting down on here. So right now, about 10 seconds. Yep. And you'll want to wait for this number to run out before the next person casts their horn. This here is the full Warhorn length. That will give you like your higher resources, etc. But this number right here is what you're looking at, because this is the maximized damage from people. Same with Colossus. That one is only really relevant for Necromancers, but if you're a Necromancer, you want to use it. Hodor doesn't automatically set up when you download it, so you have to go to Settings, Add-ons, Hodor Reflexes, and then you want to go down to, if you want to see Colossuses, you turn that on. If you want to share it, turn it on. If you want to see Warhorns, turn it on here. If you want to share it, turn it on here. You can also change it to Horn or Saxhleel. So if you're wearing Saxhleel and you get that Major Slayer from Saxhleel, then you can, or not Major Slayer. Force. Major Force. What was I saying the whole time? I was saying Slayer the whole time. I meant Force. But you can have it set to Horn or Saxhleel. So if you're using Barrier to proc Saxhleel, you can use Saxhleel. It will count down, or it will show people when your higher cost ultimate is ready. Healers do actually sometimes use Saxhleel, so it is an option. Next add-on that I have.
Now they've said I gotta farm.
Next add-on I have is Purge Tracker. That one is useful only in certain specific situations. So, Maw Twins fight, Vhoff first fight, stuff like that. That is in relation to the Alliance War support skill Purge. Highly recommend getting this skill and morphing it, because it is much cheaper to use when morphed. Purge is only really niche for those certain fights, so you'll know kind of beforehand if you need to slot it or not. But the Purge Tracker will let you know when people need the Purge, so just keeps your resources a little fuller when you know when to use it. Okay, I have Roaring Opportunist on here too. That is an add-on as well. If you are wearing Roaring Opportunist, which is a very popular healer set for Major Slayer, then it will give you a couple of timers on your screen. When you're using RO, you have to heavy attack twice in order to get it over your full group of 12, because each heavy attack covers 6 people. It will give you those 2 timers so that you know when your first heavy attack needs to be reapplied and when your second heavy attack needs to be reapplied. Surrender I put on here as well. Surrender is a buff tracker. It requires a lot of setup. Honestly, I set it all up for every buff that I wanted to track, and then my add-on settings totally redid themselves and set back to default, and I felt like a clown who had wasted a bunch of my time, so I just did not mess with it anymore. But you can essentially set up Surrender to track add-on or track buffs around your character for specific things. So even new buffs that come from sets and whatnot, usually they will have a number attributed to them, and that is the number that you can put in Surrender for it to track that specific buff. And that would be like, I think in CMX, you can like I don't know, just find a random buff or something. There's like
Um,
options, show IDs. So if you do options, show IDs, it has a number here next to each of the buffs. You can plug those numbers into Surrender to get that buff and track it. Okay. I listed those. There are more add-ons for specific trials. So Dreadcell Reef has an add-on. Uh, what is it called? Asylum Sanctorum has 2 add-ons.
it has like 4
Rock Grove,
add-ons.
yeah, Rock Grove has an add-on. There's a ton of different
Mhm.
add-ons you can use specifically for raids, and I highly recommend getting them. Um, but for the most part, the most useful, just straight up healer add-ons are those ones that I mentioned at the start: Action Duration Reminder, Combat Metronome, Raid Notifier, Codes, Combat Alerts, Hodor. Okay. All right. Let's see. How necessary are add-ons in general? So it really depends on what kind of content you're doing. So console players, as we know, do not use add-ons at all. However, if you are running with more experienced groups on PC, they generally recommend that you have add-ons. If you're doing normal trials, you don't really need them at all. Vet trials, I would say that it just really helps your group as much as it helps you. If you're not using add-ons, then generally you just have to be a lot more aware of what animations look like when enemies are casting things. Um, in terms of your performance as a healer and using things like Combat Metronome, that is, I don't want to say a crutch, but it really does kind of get you in that proper rhythm for healing on cooldown, and that's what you want to aim for, which we'll talk about in a second.
Did you mention the Roaring Opportunist
Yes.
add-on? Okay, and then there's also a Stone Talker add-on.
Yes. Yep.
If you're running that, and the MK tracker if you're
Yes.
running MK.
Yep. A lot of really nice sets have really nice add-ons. There's actually a Zen tracker as well. That one is not on
Yes.
Minion, but I do have a download for that in one of our channels. So if you are using Zen, there is an add-on for it. You can just ask me about it. Okay, so my next section here is based on weaving and animation canceling and global cooldown. So that is probably, I guess, the bigger thing that I see a lot of healers are lacking in. When we look at the logs later, you'll hear me talk about cast per minute a lot, and you'll hear me talk about raw healing slash overheal. What we're talking about when we're talking about cast per minute is basically how quickly you are casting. As we know, the DPS are parsing their little hearts out. As a healer, you're pretty much going to be doing the exact same thing. And so, without further ado, we can kind of get into that part. So, like I said, weaving is canceling the animation of the light attack. In general, you're not going for damage. It does increase your damage. As a healer, it is not as important to light attack weave as it is for DPS to light attack weave. However, I highly recommend getting into the habit of it because it does have some benefits. You can activate some passives, some sets, some skills. There's a lot of things that are niche out there that do activate on light attacks. Not as important for healers as it is for DPS. But the way that I use weaving in general is to keep track of that global cooldown, make sure that I'm casting when I can. If you're not getting those light attacks in, sometimes healers have I guess, a tendency to kind of not cast as quickly as they could be. Healing in this game is very proactive rather than retroactive, and I think that's one thing that a lot of people coming from MMOs don't realize is you're not waiting for people to lose health. You're healing them, or you're putting heals down before they lose health so that they are continually being healed. So in general, your rotation is going to be consisting of a bunch of heals over time, plus maybe a couple burst heals. So like you saw before, action duration reminder keeps track of all those. So you've got counters on all of these skills, which means that they need to be reapplied at some point. Yeah, so not a single one of my skills is just a single burst cast. A skill that would be just a single burst cast would be something like Breath of Life. Which
However, technically a burst cast.
yes, which we can get into. The reason that we don't use skills like Breath of Life is a little bit more tying into, I guess, raiding versus dungeons. So Breath of Life is an okay heal to use in a dungeon, for example, as like in oh shit. The reason being, it covers 2 people, and that's half your group in a dungeon. The reason we don't use it in a raid is because yes, it covers 2 people, and yes, it does heal more than another burst heal. However, it costs a lot, and it only covers those 2 people. So in the time that you're casting Breath of Life to cover 2 people, you could be covering your whole group or half your group with Combat Prayer. Combat Prayer heals a little bit less, but it's much cheaper, and you can just cast it more times.
Combat Prayer and Breath of Life are actually the exact same cost.
Nice. So yeah, Combat Prayer covers a lot more people, and then it also provides a buff, so Minor Berserk. We generally in raids use Combat Prayer as your quote-unquote spam heal. That also depends on what class you are. If you're a warden, you can also use mushrooms. Mushrooms gives a different buff, but Combat Prayer is a pretty reliable source. Now, in terms of healer rotations, because pretty much all of your skills are going to have a time period on them, and you want to keep them up at all times, you're going through your rotation and then reapplying them as needed. So when we get into a rotation, we've got what we call a dynamic rotation or a static rotation. Static rotation is when you go through all of your skills, go to your back bar, go through all your skills again, go back to your front bar, go through all your skills. It's very set in the order that you do your skills. A dynamic rotation is when you're doing your skills on your back bar, notice that something on your front bar that's important is running out, go back to it, reapply it, then maybe go back to what you're doing. Dynamic is just a lot more attentive to your skills' individual needs, when you need to recast them, etc. The more dynamic that you can make your rotation, the more sustain you're going to have. And the reason for that is a lot of your better heals over time are going to cost more than your burst heals. And so those specific skills, if you are casting them before they run out, you're just going to be using a lot more sustain than you need. As a healer, generally, we're not stacking sustain anymore. That used to be a thing in the past when orb spamming and and whatnot
We
was
could spam it.
important.
Spam it.
Yeah. However, these days, our heals are based, or the strength of our heals are based on our max magicka and our crit. So, just like a mag DPS, you are stacking your magicka as high as you can and your crit. Therefore, you are going to be just kind of relying on the full length of your skills, not spamming orb over and over again, which you can't now anyway. But if you have all of your skills active, you're putting out a lot of heals. In content where you are healing through a heal check, the goal is to keep up your HOTS, your heals over time, also known as HOTS, while spamming something like Combat Prayer. So that's going to be your go-to. Is definitely more important to keep your people alive than it is to get, buff uptimes, etc. That being said, once you have a good handle of your rotation, you can make sure that your buffs are getting pretty good uptimes. And that's kind of where you start to see, oh look, I'm actually becoming a really good healer. So in terms of rotation and skills, we've got these staples. You see on my bar right now, my heal bar, we've got Radiating Regen. That one is important. Hits 3 people at a time. It does stack with your other healer. So you can use it up to 4 times technically per rotation. You likely won't get that many out because you're doing other things, but if you can hit it, maybe twice in your rotation, then you're pretty good. That means you're covering like half the group, and your other healer's probably covering the rest of the group. Illustrious Healing used to be called Healing Springs. Illustrious Healing is another big one. This one covers a very large area. You want to keep it up as well. Oh yeah, so heals in ESO do tend to prioritize people who need it, which is good. And it's gotten better over time as well. Same with sets and buffs, things like that. Yes.
Launch
so
nightmare.
other skills that you'll generally keep on your bar. Orb. This is from the Undaunted line. This one takes a very long time to level up. It is your very last skill in the Undaunted line, and you do want to morph it to Energy Orb. That one, everybody in the group can use it, and it is both a burst heal when they hit it, and it gives them sustain back. It is on the same cooldown timer as Templar shards, so if you are running a Templar, you may choose to use one or the other. However, if for some reason you have a tank off by themselves and you want to get them a quick synergy, shards is great for that. And then
Well, this may be a... Oh,
Hmm?
sorry.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, you're talking
Also-
about crit and spell damage and stuff. Like, what's a good buffed spell critical and spell damage for your healer?
Good question. So, let me...
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine. I'm just trying to get pretty buffed. So your critical is going to be pretty, I guess, low compared to some DPS sets. It also depends on what set you're wearing. You generally will have enough without having to worry specifically about spell critical at your base. And then in terms of Magicka, I dump everything into Magicka. If I need some extra health, I generally boost that with my food or my gear, which we'll kind of go over later. But your spell critical and your spell damage are going to be pretty high just by putting on that gear that is recommended for healers. And so there's not really a whole lot you have to do to, I guess, strive for those numbers. And another thing too, when we get to potions, another staple of being a healer is Essence of Spell Power, which you know that mag DPS users use. So it's not just for them; we use it too.
Can you go back to what you were saying about the orb and the shards? So is there
Yes.
it not really any point in running both of them anymore?
So the only point that you would have to running both is if for some reason you're in a dungeon and you want that extra damage, or if you do want a stationary synergy that somebody needs to grab. So like I said, if you have an off tank who is in the back of the group holding something away from everybody else,
Yeah.
you could toss them a shard every now and then, and that'll get to them a lot faster than an orb.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but in general, that is definitely a flex spot for you as a Templar healer. Sorry, in terms of other skills, let's go to Resto Staff. So generally, you do want at least these 4 skills here. Healing Ward is very situational. You do have a morph on it that just, I guess, increases the strength of it. Something like this would be used in very specific instances where you have to heal maybe one particular person. For example, Sunspire, if you're healing tombs, it is very nice to use that on whoever is going in the tomb. That you could also combine with the Black Rose Restoration Staff, which I can find here. Black Rose. Yes, so Black Rose Restoration Staff, in conjunction with using Steadfast Ward, will apply Major Vitality to your target. So Major Vitality is a very nice buff to have. It increases the healing that they take. So, if you have Healing Ward on your bar, very nice to use Black Rose Restoration Staff with. If you use any of the arena sets, I do have to say you do have to make sure that that skill is on your bar. So if you're using Black Rose Restoration Staff, it's not doing much for you unless you do have Ward on your bar.
Well, if you have perfected, it gives you whatever the perfect bonus is.
Yep. Oh, yeah, that's another thing too. In terms of arena sets, you don't have to worry about perfected versus non-perfected. Generally, the perfected version of something will just give you an extra line of either like sustain or max resource or something like that. But having the non-perfected gives you the exact bonus that you need. Where it says 2 items, the staff counts as 2 items. Okay. In terms of Force Siphon, I believe that the Vadishrin Resto Staff is kind of a neat ability. People generally don't use this skill. It's kind of something that you can experiment with every now and then. I've seen maybe like one healer use it every now and then.
Very good. I mean, it's okay.
Okay, on your back bar, generally you would be running either an Ice Staff or a Lightning Staff. Lightning Staff provides the off balance, not as, I guess, loved anymore as it used to be. I think it is coming back this patch. I haven't looked at any of the changes or additions
Exploiter's
to it.
back.
Yeah.
What
But
did he say? I didn't hear.
what did you say, Invalid?
Exploiter's back, so 10% extra damage on off-balance enemies.
Cool.
If you have that slotted.
Yeah. An off balance between or in addition to, I guess, Wall of Elements giving off balance, if you and other people and other supports in your group are running Wall of Elements, you can also get some pretty good Crusher uptime. That is if you're using a Crusher glyph. So, yeah, so Crusher enchant on my Destro staff usually is where I put it. Generally, you can only cover maybe about 25 to 30% of uptime on Crusher with your wall. But if all the supports are using it, you can get some pretty good Crusher uptime. In your Destro staff line, some good skills to have. Elemental Drain for sure. This one is very important with mag users in the group. Applies major breach. Sure, that's something that the tank gives anyway. But minor magic of steel, that is really good for sustain. Okay, Crushing Shock. I use that situationally in dungeons just for getting interrupts on things, because generally the DPS will not morph to Crushing Shock. They will morph to Force Pulse. Wall of Elements as usual. If you are using an Ice Staff, you can apply Brittle for your group. That you can do with either Wall or I think people are using... tanks are using Clinch. Don't use Clinch because that will taunt.
I use Reach. Reach does not
Reach.
taunt.
So Reach is a morph of Impulse, and so if you're using that to keep...
No, Touch.
Touch.
Touch has
Oh,
two
it
morph.
is?
Yeah. Reach is the other morph of Touch.
Oh, right. Destructive Reach. Okay. Alright, cool. So Clench taunts, Reach does not. But pretty much any skill that is applying your ice damage, you will be applying Brittle as well. And that helps when your tanks are using ice staffs as well. Okay. Also, another little bonus to ice staff is you get a little bit more resistances. So if you need a little bit of safety, at least on that bar, you'll have some safety. Your Resto staff will benefit from boosted heavy attacks on that bar. So when you use a heavy attack on your Resto bar, you're going to get a lot more mag back than if you use it on your Destro bar, etc. In terms of armor, we all know that generally we're wearing light armor. Some cases you may have to wear heavy armor. For example, if you are tank healing in VAS, generally you start learning it wearing heavy armor because you have more resistances. Medium armor sets like PA, usually you wear those on your weapons and jewelry. We can get into more sets later, but generally you just keep in mind light armor. This is a general healer thing. The shield here is pretty good for certain content. There are a lot of trials where you as the healer may be asked to do mechanics that otherwise the DPS would, lose damage on the group, lose damage in the group if they were to run it. And so there are a lot of mechanics that the healers do where you might have to have a little bit more survivability. You can also kind of take advantage of the Undaunted passives for wearing a combination of heavy, medium, and light. I don't know if people really focus on that anymore. It used to be a big thing. I generally don't bother with it anymore. But if you do have heavy or medium pieces on, I would go into Undaunted, make sure that you have Undaunted metal on. Okay. Yeah, so it looks like I am wearing a piece of heavy and a piece of medium. Harness Magicka versus Bone Shield. So the difference is Harness Magicka costs Magicka, and Bone Shield costs Stamina. So it really depends on which one you think you'll have more of. I do still recommend getting Bone Surge, because it will give you Major Vitality if you have somebody activate the synergy. So Bone Surge is a very good group utility skill for a couple different reasons. When we get into sets, Martial Knowledge is activated when you dip below 50% stam, and so Bone Shield is a very good skill to use to dip below 50% stam because it's pretty expensive and it costs stam. But when you use it, your DPS synergize on it, they get extra healing. So it is a very good group utility skill. The Harness Magicka is more of a selfish option. Generally, if you're in a situation where you don't have to worry about your group for a moment, good time to use Harness Magicka. If you are definitely doing regular healer roles, usually it's better to do a cast of a heal than it is to spend that cast on a shield for yourself. In general, let's see what other skills you might have.
Where is Bone Shield again?
Bone
Sorry.
Shield is under Undaunted.
Ah, thank you.
Okay, under Assault and Support, we all know Warhorn. Warhorn is the recommended main ultimate that you use. Barrier is a very good ultimate as well. This morph in particular will heal people when you use it. And then we've also got Efficient Purge. Guard. Guard is very niche. Sometimes you might need to guard a tank who's taking a lot of damage. Basically, you put it on both your bars. It acts like a leash. The tank becomes your pet.
Also, if you really like a DPS, you can guard them
Yep.
with the other morph, and it'll give them minor force.
Yes. DPS have way more sources of minor force these days than they used to, so honestly, they shouldn't be bothering you about it.
Yeah, trap is super easy to use nowadays.
Yep.
So, if
Okay.
like, yeah.
Oh well, yeah. That, and then we got sets. They have sets like Zogvins and Medusa. So in terms of class skills, this is where I can't show you exactly all of the class skills because I am on a warden right now, but we can kind of go over some important ones. Wardens in general provide major what is it called? Is it major toughness? Yes. Words are hard. So wardens provide major toughness whenever they heal somebody. This also includes if a DPS warden activates like your healing orb or something. That major toughness is very nice for your group. It does give you a little bit of a health boost. Not end all, for groups, but generally when they're asking for a warden healer, it is just because wardens have a lot of utility, and also that major toughness. This Fetcher Infection skill is pretty important for a group. It can also be provided by DPS, but essentially gives minor vulnerability to the enemy. And if you keep that up, it's very nice for the group. Should be running it if you are the only warden in the group. Your Betty Netch is great for sustain. Keep that up pretty much at all times. If you are doing something like kite healing in certain trials, I definitely recommend Wings. Makes you fast. Other classes, if you need a speed boost and you don't want to put a CP you have a lot of options. You can either put your CP into Celerity in the red tree, or you can go to Guild Sigic. I don't have it on this character, but there's a Sigic skill called Race Against Time. It is the opposite morph of Channeled Acceleration. What that does is it reduces the amount of stamina it costs to sprint. And so on my Templar, I use that skill for like kite healing and cloud rest. Rest of the skills here. Green Balance is your regular warden healing tree. Like I said, Mushrooms gives minor intellect and minor endurance. They just updated Nightblades as well to give that with the refreshing path. So that is a nice little buff. This one you can kind of flex out for something else if you need to, but it does provide some nice sustain for your group. Budding Seeds is a great heal as well as a great synergy for folks. And if you need to activate an oh shit heal, you can activate it again and it will go off. Bursting Vines, specifically great for healing tombs in Sunspire. It is a burst heal and it does pretty much only do healing. And so you generally don't want to run it all the time, but you can run it if you need burst heal on a very specific person. Winter's Embrace. As a warden, you have a little bit more options for providing brittle to people. Some other classes have them as well. If you are running a Necromancer, for example, you might run Mystic Siphon. Mystic Siphon gives ice damage, and then so does Impaling Shards here.
Damage.
I'm sorry? Oh, sorry. Not the Graveyard.
Graveyard.
Unnerving Graveyard provides ice damage. Sorry. Expansive Frostcloak is great for your group. Just ups their resistances. Impaling Shards is great for activating Brittle if you don't have an ice staff on. Arctic Wind I would not recommend as a warden healer unless you are specifically healing yourself or specifically healing another person. So this would be if you are needing to use it in more selfish situations. Frozen Gate is great for messing with people. One of the morphs will let them synergize and it ports them to you, and I hate it. Because Tatsu used to do it to me all the time. That is pretty much Warden skills. In terms of Templar, you have a lot of different options. First off, your Ritual skill, that big AoE that you drop. That is a great class skill. So yes, just the one that you guys are using right now. In addition, the Synergy will purge people. And so that is great for when they know that they need to be purged. Another Templar skill that you want to use is Purifying Light on the target. You have very useful passives in the Templar lines that you can invoke by using a skill like that. And it just helps out your group. Shards is great too, kind of situationally, if you don't have Orb or if it's not a great place to use Orb. What else? Templars not got as many class skills anymore to use as Warden does. They've kind of neglected it a little bit. In terms of other classes, shards are great for highlighting chests. Yes.
You forgot the best.
I hate that. I hate when people throw shards on chests. It hurts my eyes so bad.
You forgot the best skill.
Oh, the best
from
skill in the
Templars.
game. The best skill in the game. So Templars have Nova. Nova activates. You get a synergy here, and that gives. Wow, what's it called? Same thing that's given by Lady Thorn.
Major Maim.
Major Maim. So Major Maim reduces the damage that the enemies put out, and so that's super helpful for things like Execute in a lot of different trials where they're just putting out a whole lot more damage. Okay. In addition to that, Wardens have their Trees ultimate. So Healing Thicket. This is a very good heal. It is very cheap as well, so it tends to come up pretty quickly. So if your group is struggling and it's not really a situation where you can use Barrier, definitely recommend Trees. Necromancer healing is actually pretty unique. The reason being, you need bodies for some of your skills. In terms of Necromancer healing, actually I wonder if I should just get on a Necromancer to show this. So
Oh, yeah.
I will log out. You guys can just chill in the group. I'll just join you guys on my Necromancer. It's a little odd. And it's not super intuitive. So I think it helps to kind of see it. Other healers are pretty similar in terms of your rotation and just adding your specific class skills. And a lot of times you can just Google a healer build for that that class. Things you want to keep in mind, you want to heal as many people as possible with your heals. Something that's short and bursty and doesn't really give a bonus buff to it is not as useful for group content like trials. Especially when you have access to Combat Prayer as a burst heal. That being said, you can get a lot of healing out of every single class.
Even Dragon Knights.
Yep, even Dragon Knights.
As weird as it is.
Yeah.
Just SF.
We have some Dragon Knight healers in here. I don't think a lot of them make it to trial. I think a lot of our main healers just use other classes. Necro healer is fun, but it can also be a little bit frustrating, and I will show why. Okay, so let's go over to Necromancer skills. Under Gravelord, of course, you got your Colossus. Don't really need to use the Colossus if somebody is running Turning Tide. They just provide the same buff. Turning Tide will actually show up on Hodor, by the way. I don't have Hodor on this tune activated, but the timer next to the Colossus icon, when a tank uses Turning Tide, it will count down how long the Turning Tide lasts, so that's really useful. We'll talk about Blast Bones in a minute, but as a healer, yes, you do want to use Blast Bones. Unnerving Boneyard, it does give the same buff that a tank does in terms of major breach, but it can be useful for ad pulls because the tank isn't always going to taunt all of the ads. And like I said before, it gives you frost damage and a little synergy for whoever wants to activate it. Okay. Shocking
Heals.
Siphon. I'm sorry?
The Boneyard Synergy heals.
Yes, it does. Yep. healing for the damage done. Shocking Siphon can be good if you need mag sustain. That one I will kind of talk about more with Blast Bones and your tether when we get to it. Bone Tyrant, you can use Necrotic Potency. That will give you your ult back faster if there's bodies to consume. Empowering Grasp, definitely recommend. This gives Minor Maim, and it empowers your allies. So the Minor Maim is good. It reduces the enemy damage. That Minor Maim is also applied by Heroic Slash by your tanks. So your boss is already going to have it applied, but it does empower your allies. So that is nice. It also increases the damage and the healing of your Spirit Mender. See you. Next one. Resistant Flesh is kind of like the breath of life of Necromancer. Kind of useful in dungeons, not super useful in raid. Oh, and of course we can't forget the reanimate ulti to res people quickly. Hexproof is basically a purge. I would maybe use purge anyway. Renewing Undeath. This one becomes a heal over time if it consumes a corpse. Generally, I'm using my corpses for other things, but it can be useful in dungeons and whatnot. You just have a whole lot of other healing options to use. Because if you don't have a corpse to consume, then it is just a single burst cast. Intensive Mender pretty much only heals you or the lowest health ally. That can be helpful if there are people who are dipping below kind of abnormally. Braided Tether is going to be your main class heal as a Necromancer. This one is where it's a little bit hard to use. So you do have to have a body to use it on. I forgot that it would give you a lead. So if I go over to the Atronach and I use Blast Bones, technically speaking, you should be able to cast Blast Bones, cast 2 skills, and then Blast Bones should have gone off by then. It really depends on your distance from the target, so sometimes I try to account for like 3 skills instead. So when I use my heals, cast Blast Bones, apply 3 more heals, and then I can use my tether. Okay. If you're using Mystic Siphon, I would do that, then cast Blast Bones again, and then on your next cast, your next usage of a corpse, you can cast your Siphon. This is where it's important as a Necromancer to make sure that you're using your Blast Bones to cast your tether, because if you happen to attach it to either your Spirit Mender, or if you attach it to another body in the area, it's not going to be going through your group. And Braided Tether really needs to be going through your group and to get the most healing out of it. So Blast Bones, cast some other heals, generally 3, and then your tether, and you can go through the rest of your rotation. If you like to keep it up. As we see, Braided Tether is running out in about 3 seconds. There, I can refresh it before it ran out. And so that's where Necromancer is just a little bit different, is you do have to kind of plan your skills in advance a little bit that way. Other healers are a little bit more static in terms of your rotation.
It's essentially no different than using Purifying Light on the timer, because like.
Yeah, I mean, just like any other skill, yeah, keep up Purifying Light on its timer. Does anybody have any other class-specific, I guess, questions? Dead silence. I love it. Okay, I'm gonna come back out to the front of the group here. Oh, as you can see on my screen now, I do have RO on this character. So if I heavy attack something, it will give me a timer. There, first timer activated. If I have more than 6 people nearby, it will activate the second timer. And then once that timer runs out, is when you heavy attack again. Okay, let's get into gear traits, potions, and food. Okay, so in terms of food, bag foods are generally what you're going to use. Sometimes you can use a tri-stat food as well. So tri-stat foods would be like bewitched sugar skulls or long fin pasty with melon sauce. Those two, just if you need the extra stam for dodging, blocking, whatever. There are CP options for that as well, which we'll get into, but they're there. Other than that, in terms of food, you usually want something that gives you health because you need to be a little bit tankier than DPS. And then something that gives sustain is nice too. So if you can sustain it, something like standard blue food will give you more magicka, and that's great. But if you need more magicka, you can use something like Witch Mother's, which is a purple food. Clockwork Citrus Fillet is very expensive, but can be nice in, I guess, harder content that you're trying to clear. Same with our Tam Pickled Fishbowl. Ghastly Eyeball, wouldn't super recommend it because you're giving up your health boost, but if you really need that mag sustain, then it can come through for you. Okay, in terms of potions, you've got your standard Essence of Spell Power. That is a great potion to use in all vet content. If you're not using that, you have two other, I guess, kind of more expensive options. You have Tripots. Again, gives you stam if you need it. And then you have Heroism Pots. Heroism Pots will give you mag return, stam return, and it will also give you minor heroism. That heroism will help you gain back your. Did I say minor? Did I mean major?
Minor.
It gives minor, yes. So minor heroism lets you regain your ultimate faster. That is for situations where you might want to cast a ton of Warden trees, or you just want to cast Nova more, or Result more if your group is struggling. I guess the best result as a healer is to just heal better. No, I'm just kidding. Sometimes things can't be healed through. In terms of Mundus, Ritual is a solid choice for healers. That's your maximum healing. Used to be Thief, not so much anymore. Ritual kind of out heals it. If you're struggling in Sustain, Atronach is an option for your Magicka return. But definitely recommend Ritual. In terms of champion points, you have a lot of options for healers now. I'm running Hope Infusion, Soothing Tide, Swift Renewal, and Living Overflow. Other options from the Brink, Focus Mending. Pretty much all your healing stuff is going to be in this little tree here. I generally use these three here, as well as you've got some in here. The guide does have a diagram right now for some options for you. In terms of red CP, I generally don't use Spirit Mastery. This is something I use on my DPS. You shouldn't really be rezzing people as the healer. You can just put that point to something else. I mean, if you're the healer, why not put it in Celerity? Yeah, of course you're not running it.
What?
Fortified is okay.
Res people.
Boundless Vitality is definitely a very good red CP for everybody. Some people use, what is it? Rejuvenation for sustain. Slippery is great if you need to break free a lot in a fight. You can also replace that with Expert Evasion if you need to roll dodge a lot in a fight. Bracing Anchor is very situational. That is in here. It is more of a tank CP, but Bracing Anchor will reduce the damage that you take by like 16%, or no, 4% all stage per stage. 4% per stage. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 4 times 5. So 20% damage reduction if you're blocking. But it does reduce your movement speed. And that part is kind of shitty in some fights. Did kind of write a little bit about that.
Does that reduce your movement speed always, or just when you're blocking?
Just in combat. Always in combat. Out of combat, you're fine. In combat, you're reduced speed, whether you're blocking or not.
That's some bullshit.
It is very good. It's very good for fights like the first two hard modes in Kind's Aegis, where everybody's taking a ton of meteor damage. But just something where you're all in your positions, you're not moving around a whole lot. Something like that is really ideal for it. Okay, in terms of gear, like DPS, you're going to be putting Divines on all of your body pieces and mag return, or maximum magicka glyphs on all these pieces. The alternative is if you think you need a little bit more health, you can kind of put a health glyph on one of these pieces. Your jewelry is going to be kind of like the DPSs as well. So you're going to be using the spell damage enchantment on them for that extra spell damage to boost your heals. In terms of the trait, Arcane is fine. You have a lot of different options as a healer. If you need a speed boost, you can go with the speed trait. Triune is okay. It is ridiculously expensive though, so I don't usually use it. Don't use Bloodthirsty. It's the DPS thing. But Arcane is pretty general, and it drops at everything, and that's pretty much perfect. Okay.
Not powerful assault, but whatever.
Oh, yeah. Unless you are using a medium set, then it will drop in robust. Okay. In terms of your staves, whatever, your Destro staff, I usually use Crusher enchant, and I usually put infused on that trait. And then for Resto staff, you have a bunch of different options. I generally go with powered on the Resto staff, not on this character apparently. And that might be because it just dropped in this trait for me and I decided to roll with it. Weakening enchant is what I use on my Resto staff. However, that is also a great place to put a mag absorb enchant. So if you do need a little bit extra mag sustain, put that absorb magic glyph on your restoration staff. Okay.
You can also use spell damage glyphs or weapon damage glyphs.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Weapon damage on your healing as well. What else? I think.
And I
that
have
pretty
like
much
for some
covers
of
it
my
here.
master stays, I have them either powered or nerfed, depending on what I want to do for a fight. So I jump
Yeah.
around between those.
In terms of arena staves, you got some options here. So Black Rose is a great one to pick up. You got other arenas like the Masters, Asylums, Maelstrom. Masters Resto staff is a pretty good one to have. That one's from DSA, Dragonstar Arena. Generally, you would run an arena Resto staff and a Destro staff of the set that you're front barring. Make sure that the set that you're wearing can be front barred. And what I mean by that is on your body, if you need to wear a set that has to be up at all times, so Spell Power Cure, that needs to be bodied. Orville's Guidance should be bodied. Something like that, you want your 5 pieces active at all times. If you're wearing an arena staff, then your back bar is only active when you're on that bar. So, for example, RO, you proc that by heavy attacking, and so all you need to do is make sure that you are heavy attacking on your bar that has a Roaring Opportunist staff. And then you can wear an arena staff on your back bar, which would be your Resto staff. Alternatively, some healers do wear the Resto staff of the set they're front barring, and then they'll wear a Maelstrom Inferno, and that's fine. I think with Lightning, no, it's not just you though. It's everybody, or not everybody, but it's a lot of endgame healers. I think that with Lightning staffs coming back, we might not see the Maelstrom Inferno as much, but it is still an option. In terms of what sets a healer should have, there are a shitload of them, and so I'm going to go through kind of a list of the ones that I find really helpful. Let's go to... I have them all listed because I can't remember them off the top of my head. Ugh, the lag on my computer is awful. So much recording and all that stuff going on. Okay. Literally just had them here. Okay. So, you've got the standard Spell Power Cure. The buff that you get from spell power cure can also be given by Olorime. Olorime is from Cloud Rest as a trial, and thus spell power cure is a lot easier to farm for because it is from a dungeon. It gives it to your full group now, and all you have to do is overheal, and you can apply it before the combat even starts too. Generally, people pair that with either a more like DPS support set, something like Martial Knowledge. Like we said before, Martial Knowledge has to be procced by getting your stam underneath 50%. So every time you want to proc it, you are either dodge rolling like hell or you are using a stamina skill. And so the stamina skills that I definitely recommend are Bone Surge from Undaunted. There's also under Fighter's Guild, you can get Circle of Protection and
That's the
morph
one I
that.
use.
Yes, that one is a very good skill because it gives everybody protection in the area that it's in. So that reduces their damage taken. What was it? I can't recall other skills that people use.
Echoing Vigor.
Vigor. Yeah, Vigor is a skill. If you're wearing PA, that doubles as your PA skill. If you are wearing Powerful Assault, you do want to make sure that you have a skill from the Assault line active. Generally, that'll be Vigor. Echoing Vigor is the morph that heals other people. I wouldn't recommend Caltrops for a healer. That's more of a tank option. You can also pair SPC with a more supporty set in terms of sustain. So Hollow Fang is a good one if people need sustain. Your group may not want sustain these days because Bosse is a DPS set that activates based on them having low magicka. So
Yeah.
sometimes seeing
Yeah,
a Hollow Fang proc makes them angry.
Or Stone Talker proc.
Yes, Stone Talker is a good option too for sustain. That requires you to keep a heavy attack active, or proc it with a heavy attack on the boss. But that is a good sustain set for the group. Your other healer may wear Rojo. Rojo stands for Roaring Opportunist and Yorvolds. Roaring Opportunist, like I've said, gives a Major Slayer. That's a very good buff for the group. And Major Slayer pretty much otherwise is given by sets like War Machine or Master Architect. War Machine and Master Architect are more DPS sets or off-tank sets these days, so you're probably not going to see it on a healer. Why use one of those when you can use Roaring Opportunist? Good luck getting a Perfected Staff, though. That shit sucks. That one, like I've shown before, you heavy attack to activate the proc on that, and you have a tracker for it. The Yorvolds part of it just extends that Major Slayer buff. And so that's why it's really nice to combine it with that. There's other options that you can kind of wear that might be more niche for like prog groups and such. Saxhleel Champion. Normally you see that on tanks, but healers can wear it as well as your weapons and jewelry because it is a heavy set. That will give the group your major force uptime with an ultimate, and based on the cost, it will give much longer duration than Warhorn does. So, for example, if you are pushing a trifecta run and you don't want people to die, you can use Barrier, and Saxhleel will activate Major Force, so it's like you used Warhorn. But it's like you used like 3 Warhorns. And it protected everybody from dying. Congrats. Okay, you have a lot of options too. Just a lot of more, I guess, niche off-tank sets are things that healers can wear. So like I said, PA, generally a tank thing, healers can wear it. Gossamer's a very nice set for specifically AoE damage. So in Kind's Aegis, and then kind of, I guess, from what I saw, the trash fights of the new dungeon, or the new trial, I should say, it protects them as well. That being said, if your full group has daggers on and they're using was it Blade Cloak, then they are already getting that evasion that Gossamer provides. But still, Gossamer really nice for keeping your group alive if there's a lot of AoE damage going on. If I look through my sets on what I have now, it's just gonna be a bunch of old shit that nobody uses anymore. But if I go through,
Firelight Mending.
I like to look at, I guess, the healer requirements for Legion because that can kind of give some good set options. Worm is still a pretty good set for when you need Magicka. Not saying that a lot of groups are going to need magicka these days, but it's there.
And off tank spirit.
Yes,
A
off
lot of
tank spirit
times.
as well. See,
You're seeing
Zen's is generally worn by Dragon Knight DPS, but Zen's can also be an option for healers that have damage over time abilities, so Wardens can wear it pretty well. Zen's is basically if you have 5 damage over time effects on the enemy, it increases the damage that the DPS are doing on them as well. Elemental Catalyst, that one is a little bit harder to keep up. I would recommend a class like either Warden or Necromancer to use something like that. Elemental Catalyst, you get the most out of it if you're using a source of frost, flame, and lightning damage. So as a Necromancer, you want to be using Mystic Siphon for your lightning or a lightning staff. You want to be using your graveyard for frost or a frost staff or Warden frost, the impaling shards. And then flame, pretty easy to get with either a flame staff or you can just look for a flame skill like Scalding Rune. Scalding Rune is in your Mages Guild line. Guild Mages, so you get Fire Rune, morph it to Scalding. That being said, Elemental Catalyst can be kept up by DPS as well at the cost of a little bit of damage from them. Eben is very niche and not super needed anymore, but if you need that extra health, I mean, something you can slot. In terms of monster sets, you can wear, if you want heals, you can wear Troll King, you can wear Bogdan. I wouldn't recommend single target sets like Chokethorn, unless it is Earthcore. Earthcore is a pretty good single target set, and that's because it can save somebody's life because it procs when they're about to die.
and more like Will.
Yeah. But Chokethorn is just a little bit too random to really save someone's life, and it is pretty single target. So there's just better options. Bogdan is area of effect. It did also scare me one day because it blocks you. It body blocks you. You have to dodge roll if you want to go through it. Sentinel is good for
That
sustain.
change.
Yeah, right? Sentinel is good for sustain. Symphony is great for sustain. Generally, you will have a healer running Symphony, and then you can have a healer running something else. Incratus is an option that boosts everybody's fire damage and protects them from fire damage. That one, sometimes you have a tank wear that, so just talk with your tanks. Make sure that you have one person wearing Symphony, one person wearing Incratus, one person wearing Nazare. Nazare puts a bunch of debuffs on the enemies when you use an ultimate. That is a new set from Shipwright's Regret.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a monster set. I generally have a healer in Troll King for content where we need a lot of healing. But in terms of sets, you have a lot of options that kind of overlap with tank. You have other really niche sets too. Curse Eater is one that I see people using for I think
chickens.
Yeah, I've had people use it on Thunder Chickens in Hoff. And that's pretty fun to watch.
I do.
Yeah. Okay.
A lot of people sleep on it, but Bloodspawn is still okay.
I actually don't know what Bloodspawn does. Let me check. Oop, can't spell. When you take damage, have a 6% chance to generate ultimate. Yep, so ulti regen set. Ulti regen is nice.
And it's
Okay.
much more reliable than Baron Zedrus.
Yes. In terms of mythics, you can go for some, I guess, self-sustaining mythics like Gaze of Sithis if you're doing something like tank healing and you need to survive a lot of damage, and that can help. Gaze of Sithis, I believe, makes it so you don't have to block. Yep. So reduces your block mitigation to 0, which means blocking doesn't do anything. However, you get 4,000 armor in return, and so that can protect you from a lot of things without blocking. So tank healing, BAS, that'll help. Sorry, you were saying something invalid?
People laughed at this left-handers on the PTS.
Oh.
But I think people are sleeping on it.
Roll dodge no longer evades attack and instead grants a damage shield. Interesting.
I think people are sleeping on it for tank healing and AS.
Yeah, that could help. Because tank healing, there's a lot of shit in there that you can block. But if you're in it for too long, you're taking up all your stam. And so I could definitely see roll dodging. You get that damage shield. That's a huge damage shield.
It only lasts for
Um,
1 second, but that's enough to take a
that's
tick or
enough to
two.
get yourself out of the damage. That could be really neat. Pearls of Elnafay is a mythic that people have thrown out. I don't have it myself, so I'm going to look up the effect of it. When you use resources to cast a healing ability while in combat and your dominant resource is under 30%, gain ultimate. So whenever you're low on sustain, you gain ultimate pretty quickly.
There's no cooldown on it,
Yes.
which is absurd.
Okay. Spalder of Ruin as well. That one, at the cost of your sustain, will give damage to your DPS. That one you activate by crouching, and then you uncrouch and it'll be active. It's a little red AoE that you cover people with. Generally, it is nice for a healer to wear because you can just heavy attack to get your sustain back. Tanks, you don't always have the option of choosing when you heavy attack, so it can be a little bit sustain heavy in certain circumstances, but other times off tanks can wear it.
Well, tanks usually run balance for mag, so and when you're blocking, you
Yes.
don't reach the stam, so.
Yeah,
Yep,
unless
and this
you're
is the
my
Spalder effect on the floor right
tanks.
here. Okay. All right. Let's go into reading logs, because that is a pretty important thing to do. I'm going to swap my screen share in both my recording as well as Discord. So give me just a second. Let's turn on browser. Go to a log that I have. And now let me swap my in-game stream. Screen share logs. Okay. So you should be able to see a log here and a Sonic trailer. This is a VK hard mode from quite a while ago. So we don't really know a lot of the people in here.
Nice. Not calling any of us
No. Okay.
I was like sweating this.
So I'm not gonna call anybody out in this. Here we have actually Emmy is in here. Hi Emmy. So if we go to a
Wow,
summary here,
that is a very old log.
it is. We have a summary of all the encounters and trash fights here. This is where people usually land and start looking at stuff. You do have to kind of do some filtering though to kind of see where your stuff is at. You can check your gear and everything in here as well. So here we can literally click on any of these people if you want to see what gear they're wearing, what skills they have. If you are wondering what build you want to use for an upcoming prog or a trial, I highly, highly recommend going onto esologs.com, looking for a report of a group that has cleared that trial, maybe even somebody who cleared it on hard mode, because then you know that they're running very good sets and very good gear and skills. That way you can look at what they're wearing and say, I'm going to wear that. Okay. But here, just general overview. What we want to look at is we want to look at a specific fight. VKA is a very good trial to look at your healing, just because both Yonder and Roll are very good, I guess, grouped up fights where you're getting most of the people in the group. Okay. So if we go to the Yonder fight, like I just did, go to healing. Okay. Over here, we have a button that normally you don't use. This is called overheal. First, before I go there, you see the raw, or you see the heals that the healers are putting out. This is all the heals that are being absorbed by the group. And what I mean by absorbed healing is somebody absorbs healing when they're low on health. So that is the amount of active absorbed healing that is being put out. Now, if we go to overheal, it vastly changes this graph. So whereas Storm was healing 9k heals per second before, go to overheal, she was actually putting out raw heals of about 65,000. And nowadays, you can actually get a lot higher even. But in this instance, 65,000 heals per second. Other healer was putting out 56,000 heals per second. The overheal is accounting for the amount of heals that you're throwing out on the group that aren't being absorbed by people being damaged. So for this number to be high, your group does have to be alive, and you do have to be aiming at them. So if you're just healing in the middle of nowhere, that's not going to count as overheal. In terms of, I guess, fights you see nowadays, you can see people in the 80,000s to the 100,000s in this fight. It really just depends on changes that are made over time to, I guess, everything in the game. Damage has creeped upwards, healing has creeped upwards, tanking options have changed, etc. Now, when we're looking at a number like this, we're not exactly comparing it to a DPS parse, but it does give you, as a raid lead, a pretty good idea of the performance of your healers. And what I mean by that is it kind of gives you an idea of their performance based on the same way that like a DPS parse would. So if you see a DPS who's parsing in the 100,000s, you know that they have a very good idea of how a rotation works, and how quickly they're casting. Now, if you want to check cast per minute specifically, you can do that as well. So this is overheal. We go into casts instead. Okay, so I've clicked on casts. This is where we get into casts per minute. Okay, so here we see that highest cast per minute, DPS. That's going to be pretty standard. Ideally, DPS first, then healers, then tanks. And the reason for this is cast per minute includes things like light attacking, dodge rolling, bar swapping, even blocking. All of those count as casts. And so if you're thinking of somebody who is weaving, you're thinking of somebody who is doing one light attack and one skill for every second. And so you would think cast per minute maximum would be about 120. You're not going to see those numbers, especially in raid, just because the global cooldown is not exactly 1 second, and then some skills are a little chunkier than others. You may have people block casting in trial, you may have people doing mechanics in trial, etc. So DPS usually see them between 80 and 100 casts per minute, depending on the content. Healers might start to fall a little bit behind. Nowadays, you'll see them, between 70 to 80 to 90, depending on what they're healing. And that is because you, as a healer, are going to heavy attack more. You're going to block cast more in order to stay alive. What I mean by block casting, by the way, is that you can block while casting most of your skills. The exception would be channeled skills and bar swapping. So if you are needing to block an attack, you can hold block continuously while you are casting your heals. While you're doing that, you're not light attacking, weaving, or light attack weaving. You're just blocking while casting. It will protect you, and you can heal people at the same time. Don't bar swap while you're doing that, because if you are getting hit by a one shot, that bar swap will get you killed because it does drop your block. But in terms of cast per minute, tanks are going to be at the lowest because they're blocking a lot of the time. Also, some of them don't weave skills, which is fine. They don't really have to. But in terms of your cast per minute, you want to be kind of shortly following up the DPS. Okay. This is where you kind of pick apart your performance as a healer and kind of look about where to improve. I would say that in terms of today's standards versus this particular log, our healers could have definitely gotten out some more casts per minute here. Maybe something even like 20 more casts per minute.
Well, yeah, the one thing that I always, when I look at, like, even if, for instance, the Templar healer there was active only 85%, so that does impact your CPM for
Yes.
that total column. But if you hover over it, over the percentage, it'll give you an actual sense of what their, while they were active, CPM
Yeah, I actually
was.
did not know that.
Yeah, I look at that a lot for
Yeah, so there
me
you go.
if I have a rough one.
Yeah, I learned something new. There's tons of gems in the logs, and there's one of them.
So just out of curiosity, how does
Yes.
someone in a trial active, like, 85% of the time. So like, is that like they were like holding block for or
Died.
not or die? Okay, so they
You
died
either
or
died or you showed up to the fight late
Yes.
or
Yep. So like if we
yeah.
click on Tazio specifically, we can see his breakdown of cast here. So you see he weaves, so light attack is going to be pretty much up there in the top, because he is doing a cast with most of his skills. Now, in terms of yeah, activity, you might die. And it looks like, he also resurrected somebody. So while you're resurrecting somebody, I
hmm
don't know if it counts the whole resurrect as you being active or if it just counts like the first cast of it or the first tick of it. But in terms of cast per minute, you can break down your cast per minute by clicking on you specifically and then checking cast per minute per skill
yeah. I
too.
just want to make sure I'm understanding like the active in the fight because
Yeah.
I've never been in a trial where I think that anyone's taking a break for 20% of the
Oh,
fight.
yeah, absolutely.
No, it happens a lot. Like if you get dead in some fights, and I've had
Right.
fights where I've been almost 20% just because nobody ever rezzed me.
Right. No,
And
death makes a lot of sense. That
yeah.
100% makes sense.
Yeah. So if you're looking to at one specific person, it'll break down all of your casts here. You can kind of look at certain skills. So for example, overflowing altar. The time period that lasts for is 30 seconds. So you would expect 2 casts per minute. So if you look in here, let's see, her overflowing altar, 1.4 casts per minute. That means that she was keeping it active pretty often, because the maximum would be 2. Otherwise, if it's more than 2,
Right.
that means you're overcasting it. Similarly, you can look at something like illustrious healing. So 6 casts per minute. We look at how long illustrious lasts, 12 seconds. So 6 casts per minute. That's a little bit overcasting it because you would want to be about 5 casts per minute. That's just if you're casting it perfectly. However, this on hard mode is a mobile fight, so maybe she is moving it as the group is moving. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Same with, blockade you can look at. Combat prayer is one of your spammables. So often you're going to see a higher cast per minute than what it generally is just to keep the uptime up. Things like that. There's a lot that you can think of and a lot you can break down in the logs. But if you are trying to use a skill more, then here's a pretty good place to, I guess, look to see, oh, I'm overcasting that a lot, or I'm undercasting that, etc. And that is just under the cast tab here again. Okay. In terms of buffs and debuffs, let me check who's wearing RO. Wearing opportunist. So she was wearing RO. So specifically RO, you don't want to look at roaring opportunist because you got the cooldown and whatnot, the cast,
Did you
whatever.
change it?
I would look at Major Slayer. So we go to the Major Slayer buff.
Yeah, change it to cast by friendly.
Yes.
Upright. Not that.
Oops.
What?
I went, what am I doing? Oh, gain by friendly, cast by friendly. And then, well, she's only wearing it, so it's only going to show her anyway. But you got a bunch of different options here. So if you're looking at buffs specifically cast by you, you do want to make sure it is changed to cast by friendly. And then you can look at all friendlies. Why is it not showing everybody? Oh, here we go. Okay, so if you go to gained by friendly, you can see everybody's uptime on this. So if you're looking at how often you're casting it, you go to cast by friendly. If you're looking at how often each person got the buff, then you go to gain by friendly. So here we see everybody in the group and when they got RO applied. So here, because it is mostly static, like in this first half of the fight, that means that she was indeed doing 2 heavy attacks for each application of RO. Because RO only applies to 6 people, and it looks like everybody had it for these periods of time. Here it looks like it fell off a little bit. It looks like she cast it once. This might have been either death or transitioning. Looks like she might have cast only once here. Or people were just simply out of the way because only 4 people didn't get it. So maybe they were either dead or they were too far away. And then here again. So she has pretty good uptime of this. You can track other buffs as well. Debuffs too. So debuff cast by friendly, not major slayer. All abilities. Let's like look for Magic of Steel. Is it minor Magic of Steel? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here is Ellie Drain uptime from Tadzio. So it looks like he was running the Ellie Drain. He could have been dead in this portion here. That might also explain why he was only active 85% of the fight. I mean, you can track pretty much every buff here. They were specifically wearing Rojo, and then he was wearing, let's see, Spell Power Cure and Worm. So he didn't have anything to really worry about. But highly recommend using the cast menu to track your casts of your heals. Make sure that everything is pretty good uptime. And like I've said before, that cast per minute, that raw healing, very good numbers to look at. It just gives you a very good idea of how quickly you are getting everything out. If you're not comfortable with weaving, I highly recommend it. That's going to be where a lot of healers are falling short these days, is just keeping all of your skills active as much as possible. If you're struggling with the specific class that you're on, you can always change to a different class. Like I said, some of the classes that people don't play a whole lot might be a little bit harder than others. Warden is, I don't want to say like a baby healer option. It just has a lot of group utility and a lot of versatility. So Warden has a lot of different options for you to kind of cycle in through.
So I have a question about that, because
Yes.
like on my Templar healer, I've noticed like when I run in a trial with another Templar, I mean everything goes fine. It all works out in the end. But when I run with a Warden healer with a Templar healer, it seems like things go better. And I don't know if I don't understand why. Like it doesn't seem like they're I don't know if it's because there's 2 different abilities being used and maybe they work better, or different buffs and debuffs.
Yeah, so I don't really know when this happened, but at some point in time they started to kind of neglect Templar healers a little bit. Their skills just aren't as special, quote unquote, for healing anymore.
A tear just came down my eye, but go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Summer set.
Except Nova, the best skill in the game. But
It was summer set.
It really is. It really is.
yeah, so it's not that you can't get as much healing out of Templar. It's just that Templar doesn't have as many options. So a lot of your Templar specific skills are going to be geared towards either the buffs or debuffs you're placing, or utility, I guess, as opposed to a Warden healer. You might, as the Templar, be slotting more non-class and non-healer skills. So you might be slotting the Overflowing Altar, or you might be slotting the Bone Surge for Cloud Rest, or whatever you're slotting. You might be doing the LA Drain because the Warden has too many skills and they want to use them all.
Right. Okay.
That's just kind of how it falls. Warden has a lot more class utility than Templar does now. And it kind of falls that way with the other healers as well. So Nightblade Sorcerer and Dragon Knight. Necromancer has a little bit more utility as well, I would say, than Templar and the other ones. Plus,
So I may be
Wardens.
even more blind than I know. So like in my mind, I'm like a Templar and a Warden are working great together. But what you're saying is like a Warden and anyone but a Templar would be doing even better.
No.
I
So,
wouldn't say better. Yeah.
yeah, and also, like, there's a lot of different synergy that you get with different combinations. So, like, for example, if you have 2 Templar healers, you're going to start to run out of skills that you guys could use. So, like, Purifying Light, you only really need 1 Templar running that.
Right.
And if a DPS is running it, because, you know, Templar DPS typically use that skill, then you don't even have to run it at all on the healer.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, whereas it's just different because a lot of Templar skills are also used by the DPS, whereas Warden, typically Warden healers are running vastly different skills than Warden DPS.
Which result in more like synergies being up and uptime and stuff like that.
Yeah. And then, like I've said before, the major toughness from Warden is very nice. Maybe that is an option that they could have spread around a little bit to other classes, other skills, things like that. If you have a group that does not have a Warden healer at all, then you might be relying on a Warden DPS to burst the healing orb to get that buff. Or for them to even slot a heal, which they're probably not going to be super willing to do, a group heal.
Just make them slot vines.
Vines is single target though. I don't think you
Or
activate.
what's it? Lotus.
Well, I think what you're saying too, because in a lot of trials I run, either like through pugs or like non-vet kind of stuff like that, I don't think anyone's really caring or thinking about it. No one's saying, is there a Warden doing toughness? If not, please slot it if you're the DPS and only
Right.
Warden here.
Yeah.
So maybe we're not getting toughness at all, but when we have the Warden healer, we are, and it just makes things smoother.
Yeah,
to
and I
that
mean,
extent.
you can clear all content without toughness. You don't need toughness to survive, but it is very nice, and it makes it so that, like, people who normally do have to kind of take a look at their health and be like, ew, I have 17k health, like, it helps.
Yeah. Right.
It's basically like having Eben, but for free. So, or like the Eben set, which people used to use a lot more often in groups. Now you don't really use it at all because you have Boundless Vitality on everybody's CP, and then you also have a Warden healer. So, what is what?
No, that's good information. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the
Oh,
last
let's
2
see.
patches have actually been really good for Nightblade healers. Like in February, they changed the way that the healthy offering worked. It used to be healthy offering was totally all health based, and now the initial utilization of it is mag. So
Nice.
I've started using my heal blade for tombs. Oh gosh, she is great in tombs. It's amazing. And then this last patch, they updated Refreshing Path now, and it adds a lot more with the major, instead of just the major expedition, you get minor endurance and minor intellect as well. And yeah, so they've really been buffing other classes in their heals.
No love
So.
for Templar.
Hmm?
No love for the OG. it's fine because other classes did stuff too. Templar had it for like the first 5 years of the game.
Yeah, it is the OG though, you know, because I ran a Templar healer up until 2017. 2017. So
Yeah.
I've had a Templar since release, and this is all news to me, and I'm feeling this weird crushing feeling around my heart.
I'm so sorry. Look, like that all being said, you can be a very strong healer regardless of what class you're using. It is
I
entirely
gotcha.
based on your skill.
I'm just being dramatic.
Yeah, so Wardens, they just offer, I guess, a lot of the group utility that a lot of groups expect. But that being said, in terms of raw healing every class, you can put out enough as long as you are you do have pretty high cast per minute and you are watching your rotation. That is the biggest thing that I would want to drill into anybody trying to learn healing. We get a lot of brand new healers who come in and they say, I heal because I can't DPS. And then I mean, I'm never going to try to discourage somebody, but some of the best healers I know also are very good DPS. And the reason for that is because they know how to weave and then they can cast on cooldown. And so it's not really a matter of DPS just make better healers. It's more of a matter of understanding how to play the game at like the proper speed and rhythm. That's just kind of how it falls out. And honestly, because you only have 2 healers per raid, I do recommend that healers make a DPS anyway. It can be fun. I know it's a little frustrating to learn, but weaving, once you get the hang of it, it can be super fun, and it can be just add like a level of challenge to your healing. Yeah, that being said, like even like you just said you heal because you can't parse on a dummy. I hate parsing on a dummy. I'm a DPS main and I cannot stand it.
Yeah, I
bad.
can't. Well,
Yep.
there's CPTSD, but I also can't focus on something that's not attacking.
That being
Well,
said,
I think it's the information was great in the sense that like on my healer, I've always used weaving on my like utility damage destruction stat bar, but I've never weaved while on my heal bar. So I didn't even think about it. So that's great information.
Yeah. And like honestly, if you were to Google like the benefits of weaving as a healer, you're not really gonna find a whole lot.
But it was game changing for me to start
Yes.
doing it.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about it, but once you do know how to weave, you are casting on cooldown. You're getting way more casts out than somebody who is not weaving. And that is, I guess, the biggest takeaway from this clinic for anybody who is not weaving before or anybody who is struggling on getting their healing up is practicing weaving. And that's something that you just really have to sit down and do. So what I tell DPS when they're weaving is practice the same skill over and over again. Practice weaving that skill. Combat prayer, or combat metronome, I should say, is a super great add-on to have. You can't always see your character when you're in a trial because you're covered by other people and covered by effects, and so having that add-on showing you when to cast can be a game changer for some people. And so yeah, just getting that weaving in really helps you as a healer and really helps your growth and your efficiency in the group. And knowing how to read a metronome too. Yeah.
I, for the longest time, didn't understand what that red thing was for, so it was always casting on that. So I stopped using it, and I used, I started using GCD. But now that you told me, I've gone back to it, and it's like, oh my gosh, another game changer.
Yeah, I am.
When you light attack, right?
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
The red, yes. The red is when you light attack. I am a chronic clicker, and so I literally just click my mouse continuously and then press the skills when I need to. That doesn't work for everybody. We have people who play with disabilities, we have people who have arthritis, and I know that I understand that really limits your ability to weave. And so combat metronome can really help you get in those light attacks when you can't be clicking 24/7 like some kind of psycho like me.
Well, on the opposite end of that, like I was talking to someone the other day that when I got the metronome, I realized that I was clicking so much and like hitting my next ability so much that I was missing some light attacks because I wasn't like consciously like waiting. You know, there was that like half a second where in between I didn't hit the light attack, but then I was hitting the next ability before I was light attacking again. So even though I was like clicking my light attack over and over and over again, I was not actually light attack weaving half the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had that issue too. Yeah.
I think what a lot of healers too also don't realize before they think about weaving is that they are trying to cast their heals a lot faster than they're able to. So like, you can't cast another heal until that global cooldown is finished. So you think you're casting your skills when you're not. And that's
very guilty.
And that's where you can definitely see, where you're missing skills. Weaving is I guess, a slower rhythm than people kind of assume when they first look at people doing it, because it looks very fast. That's why getting that rhythm down is just really important for improving that process and getting heals out. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for tonight. That was
Yeah,
awesome.
does anybody have any other questions about healing, skills, gear, anything?
Question.
Yes.
I teleported bread.
You okay, I thought you were going to say something about Warlock again.
Oh yeah, Warlock. Hang on, let me find it. Warlock.
I don't think Poppy's deconstructed her Warlock either.
I was not around before the Warlock meta, or because I started healing in Dark Brotherhood and Warlock was bygone then.
Yeah.
But
So I could see this being useful in an era where healer is based on your sustain and being able to pump out orbs like nobody's business.
also, like, yeah.
Yeah, when healers made the change from needing super high sustain and the ability to spam the fuck out of orb and healing springs, it then became a focus to spell damage and spell critical to improve your heals and your critical healing, which I think was a great change. Also because having 20 orbs floating across your screen is really bad for your frames.
It's orc spam.
Yeah.
Never forgive it elsewhere for what they took.
All right. Any other questions? Anything people have wondered about? Well, that is pretty much everything. Again, Legion of the Bloodworks. If you ever have any questions about PvE content, you can ask me. If I don't know the answer, generally I know somebody to ask. And then also, if you are interested in breaking into endgame trials, putting this stuff into practice, then you can always stick around on the Discord. We do everything through Discord. You don't have to have a guild invite at all in game. All the signups, all the ranking and stuff is through Discord. So if you want to, we run what we call tier 1 training nights every week. That is basically whatever the weekly trial is, we will run it and we will teach you the mechanics and you can learn it. Tier 1 rank requirements are listed in the Discord somewhere. Sometimes if we're having trouble filling, we'll lower it to Skeever. Skeever is a rank that you can give yourself if you want to be notified when a raid is open to everybody. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful to some people. I am still working on the written document version. Cosine actually linked a very helpful guide online as well. That is currently in the channel called Support Discussions, I think. Support Discussions. Yep, and I did pin it as well. And so if you want to go to that specific website, it has pretty much going to be a lot of the same info. But yeah, trying to get my healer guide out to be kind of like a sister guide to my DPS guide as well. Yeah.
Great stuff. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Clicks.